Thank you for tuning in to another episode of One More Story. Just a quick programming note, parents, if you'd like to skip past the interview and go straight to the first story, you can find it at the 10-minute mark. And please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on all the social media platforms at One More Story Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and enjoy tonight's episode. Welcome to One More Story. Our guest tonight is Martin Garcia. You may recognize him from Get Shorty, Ray Donovan, and dozens of other TV shows. My son actually recognized you from Henry Danger. So, yeah. Martin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Pete. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while. In 1997, I worked at Second City as I don't know, what was I, front of house? I did everything. I worked in the kitchen.
Were you a host?
I was a host. Thank you. I was a host. And I got to learn from the best improvisers in the world. And one of them was you. And I remember you filling in on the main stage for a couple weeks during Paradigm Lost. You were in...
For Scott Adsit.
Yes, who's also brilliant.
He's like my idol from Second City.
Oh, I mean, there was just such great...
During my time there. I have other idols too, but yeah.
Yeah, well, so talk a little bit about that, because I'm curious to hear about your transition from Chicago Improv to now LA TV world. What's that been like? When did it happen for you? How did that happen for you?
Wow. I will preempt this by saying it wasn't a lot of fun.
Okay.
I moved to Chicago from Austin with 3 other friends, and moving to Chicago was like the first time I ever took a real shot on myself, was I'm going to go do something, And so being in Chicago was just like this huge adventure for me, and it worked out so well, so quickly that it really spoiled me. So I got hired to be an understudy for the touring company in November of '95, right after Halloween and right after my last level 5 show. So that's the last, you go through all the levels of Second City, and then your team does a show for 6 weeks. So we had just finished our last show, and I got hired right after that. So it was literally maybe a little over a year from when I moved to when I got hired by Second City. It was ridiculous. So, that was November 95. And then I did my last main stage show, September of 2003. So I was there for quite a while. I did 6 shows, 3 on the ATC and 3 on the main stage. And even though I complained all the time, I loved my job. I loved the creativity. I loved having control over, way more control than most artists have, in New York or certainly here in LA, over, what I wrote and what was put on stage and stuff like that. I spent a year in Chicago after I quit and was miserable because I wanted to be still on stage. So I decided, we need to go somewhere. We need to go do something. So then Second City had an opening in Las Vegas for their show at the Flamingo. So I moved to Las Vegas, lived there for a year doing that show, had a great time with my cast, Las Vegas. Then I did cruise ships for a year and a half, something like that. Then I moved to LA, was here for a year, left to do a cruise ship. Came back the next year, so this is 2009, left to do another cruise ship.
Now, were the cruise ships through Second City as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through Second City. So that takes us to 2010, and then I was halfway through that year. I was working on a cruise ship, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I quit halfway through my contract. Went up to Austin, thought I was gonna just give it up, and I spent 6 months in Austin, living with my mother, and I realized I wasn't happy there either. So I was like, well, if you're not happy here, you're not happy on the cruise ship, you're not happy in Chicago, you're not happy in LA, it's not the place, it's you. So you might as well go to LA, where at least you have opportunities, where you have an opportunity to potentially do something. and I decided that I was going to come back and plant, and I couldn't leave. So I actually considered January of 2011 my plant day in Los Angeles, and I haven't left since. And I had an agent within a year after I moved back, and the third audition he sent me out on, I booked.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was just basically a decision to just plant and let go of what I had known and just embrace the chaos that is Los Angeles.
And so, your background is comedy, but obviously you've done, I was watching some of the Ray Donovan clips. Are you, right now in your career, are you more open to good roles, or are you looking one way or the other?
I'm having, there's a little bit of a crisis in my comedy side. It's like, what is funny, and what is really funny? Because I get a lot of auditions for shows I will not mention that I'm not a big fan of.
Comedy shows, or
comedy shows,
okay.
And it's my comedy sensibilities have changed, and I'm not as enamored of certain styles as I used to be. I like comedy, like I have kind of a dark sense of humor.
Okay.
And so I like comedies that have drama within them. And I'm taking the acting class at MARTIN GARCIA Braun studio.
Great.
Yeah, and it's way more. We sometimes have a I don't know about a clash, but we do discuss. Like, I'll bring in something I wrote that I think is funny, and she'll be like, "It's funny, but you can play it more dramatically, and it probably would be funnier."
Right.
So, and then sometimes you don't get the laughs that you thought you were going to get. And a lot of times this happens where I'll write something that I think is funny, and people are like, "Oh, wow, that's sad." I'll be like, "Really?"
That's all perspective, right? I mean,
well, sure. But I think that's like my go-to for sure. But a lot of comedians' go-to is like when something happens that's sad, you make it funny. You try to make it funny so you can deal with it.
Yeah, it's catharsis.
Yeah. But then when someone else hears it, they're like, "Oh, wow, that was good." I was like, "Oh, that's right. You're right. That's not ideal."
So you're pretty busy. I know you do a lot of dance classes as well.
I just started doing those actually earlier this year.
And how are you finding that?
I love it. I used to be in a dance company when I was in Austin for a couple of years called Tapestry Dance Company, and it was a multi-form company. This is more of a hip hop class, and I've always danced my whole life. Like I've always been a dancer, like going to school dances and clubbing when I was in college and stuff like that. So I've always danced. And sometimes I have these spaces where I don't do it for a long time, and I realize I'm getting in a bad mood, and I'm like, I need to go back.
You got to kind of release things. Otherwise you end up building up all that tension, and it's hard to wind down. It's hard to fall asleep, which is actually a perfect segue into, I know that was so calculated.
No, it's good. It's good.
But yeah, how do you? I mean, life is stressful in LA. It's very hard to be any kind of an artist anywhere. So how do you shut your brain down? How do you settle down for a good night's sleep?
I don't think I'm particularly good at it. I don't have a hard time falling asleep, though. I am one of those people that will be on my computer till the end until I go to sleep. It's not good, but it doesn't interfere with my sleeping. What it interferes with is the time that I go to bed, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then I do this now. I just recently started doing this because I'm kind of a worrier. So I've started doing this thing where I'll be, put my computer away, turn off all the lights and all that stuff. And then I will say to myself, Martin, I love you. You deserve every great thing. You deserve all the good things that could happen in your life. And, I give myself some praise before I go to sleep.
That's awesome. We're going to tell an old-fashioned bedtime story. That's what we're going to do.
Let's do it.
All right. So the word for the story duel is tropical. Once upon a time, there was an old man who lived on a tropical island. And every morning, he would wake up and he would brew the darkest, richest cup of coffee you can imagine. And he would sit on his porch and he would look out on the water. And it was beautiful. The sand was pure. The ocean was blue. The seagulls would fly gently across and skim the surface of the water. And he would sit and he would enjoy this rich, dark cup of coffee. And he had the best life. He never wore shoes. Sometimes he wore a shirt, but he was on a tropical island. He didn't need to. The weather was beautiful. And every morning, after his cup of coffee, he would go and pick a coconut. It wasn't close, his favorite coconut tree. He had to walk about 1.5 miles, and he would do this walk every morning in bare feet after his cup of coffee and a bran muffin. He liked to have a bran muffin. He was a healthy old man. I mean, he didn't get to this age without eating right, and a bran muffin is a important part of a healthy diet. So he'd have a bran muffin, maybe some fruit, whatever was in season. They had lots of fruits. They had mangoes, they had strawberries. And after his breakfast and his cup of coffee, he would walk to this coconut tree, his favorite coconut tree. And every morning, he would climb it, and he would pick one coconut, just one. He could have picked 2, he could have picked 3, but he was not the greedy sort. And he knew that every day he would just come back and he'd get a new coconut. It was sort of his ritual. He liked it. If he picked too many at once, then he wouldn't have anything to do maybe one day, and there wouldn't be any coconuts, right? So he did his morning walk. He walked to the coconut tree, and he shimmied up that tree, and he got to the branch, his favorite branch. There were lots of branches on the tree, but there was one in particular that just had the best tasting coconuts. And he saw the most amazing thing. In a row of brown, mossy coconuts, he saw a blue coconut, and he was shocked. He'd never seen a blue coconut. No one on the island he knew had ever seen a blue coconut. He had a good friend on the island, though. That delicious coffee didn't come from just anywhere. It came from his best friend, Fernando, who was a coffee grower. And he thought, if anybody knew anything about an odd-colored coconut, it would be Fernando. So he went for a walk to Fernando's.
When he arrived at Fernando's, Fernando yelled out, "Ah, my wonderful good friend Tito. Tito, what brings you here today?" And Tito said, "Well, the darndest thing happened to me today. You know that tree I always go to get coconuts?" "Of course I do," said Fernando. "Well, today I found this." And he showed it to Fernando. Fernando reacted with wide eyes and a mouth wide open. He was completely shocked. He said, "My goodness, you have found the blue coconut of the coqui." Tito looked at him and said, "The blue coconut of the what?" He said, "Of the coqui." Tito said, "I have no idea what the coqui is." He said, "Well, I can't believe you lived on this island for so long and you have no idea what a coqui is." The coqui are those small little frogs that at nighttime make that wonderful little sound. They go coqui, coqui, coqui. "That's what that is," Tito said. "I've never seen one up close." And Fernando said, "Well, my friend, this blue coconut is a sign that you must go find one of these little frogs, give him or her the blue coconut, and you will be given riches beyond belief." Tito was incredibly excited. Because like, riches beyond belief? I had no idea that this happened. Fernando was like, "It does not happen often, my friend. The last time I heard about it happening was back in 1925. It's like, wow, that's a long time. Fernando said, "You only have 24 hours to find one of these little frogs. After that, the coconut will turn its regular green or brown color, and you'll be out of luck." So Tito, not wanting to waste any time, left Fernando's and started his hunt to find one of these little frogs. They're very little. There's a lot of them, but they're very little. It's not an easy task. So he figured it's frogs, so I should go to a water source. So he went to the river, well, more like a creek, that was closest to his hut. And he walked along the creek and just searched and searched and searched and couldn't find anything. He could hear them, but he could not find them. The reason he could hear them was because the sun was going down. And he realized, oh, it's getting very, very late. If I don't find a frog tonight, I will not be able to find one during the day tomorrow. So I have to find one tonight. So he searched and searched and searched and searched, and hours went by. And he sat down, tired, and about to give up, when he heard music, like very, very, very faint music, very high-pitched. And he's like, where is that coming from? And he looked around and he saw some leaves over to his left. And the reason these leaves stood out was because it seemed like they were lit from inside. So he walked over to the leaves very quietly, and the music got louder. And then he went up to the leaves and slowly bent down to look under the leaves. And there were a lot of coquis under the leaves. And they were having a party. You know, tropical island, they like to party. So he looked under there and he's like, oh, I found what I need to find. I just need to get one of these frogs to give them this blue coconut. So he yelled, but the music was so loud and high pitched that they couldn't hear him. So he didn't want to do it, but he had to lift up the leaf. But when he lifted up the leaf, most of the frogs ran away, except for this one frog that was sitting at what we will call the bar inside the club. And it was a very, very old frog. You could tell it was old because it was not as smooth as the other frogs. And he said, oh, hello, I'm too old to run away from you, so if you do whatever you want to do to me, I don't care. You know, I've had a good life. I've had a long life. I have many children. Most of them just ran away. So do what you will. And Tito said, well, I'm just looking for one of your frogs to give this to. And he showed the frog the blue coconut. And the frog's eyes got even wider than a frog's eyes are already. And he said, I can't believe this is happening. I was born in 1925, the last time someone found a blue coconut. And I never thought I'd see the day where I would see one. And now it's here. What is your name? My name is Tito. What's your name? Well, my name is Coqui, because we're all named the same thing. I was like, okay, well, here you go. Here's the blue coconut. I'm glad I found you. I'm very, very tired. So I'll take my reward now. And the frog said, oh, well, I don't give you the reward. The reward is given to you. You go back home and they'll go to sleep and the reward will be there the next day. But thank you very much. This blue coconut means everything to me. And the frog jumped on top of the blue coconut and he disappeared into thin air. And Chito was like, well, that's strange. But then he realized, oh, this was an old frog. So maybe he moved on to the next plane and maybe he's in a better place. Maybe it's magic and he's been taken to this new place, some sort of portal for them. It's like, well, okay, that works for him. So I'm just going to go home and I'm going to go to sleep. So he walked home and he went to sleep. And when he woke up in the morning, his hut looked the same. Everything seemed normal. He went and made his coffee. He got some fruit. He ate the normal things he usually eats. Nothing was new. He went to Fernando's, said, hey, I never got my riches beyond belief. And Fernando said, oh, well, did you give the coconut to a frog? He said, yes, I did. He said, well, what was the frog? And he said, well, it's an old frog. And he got on the coconut and he disappeared. And he goes, I see. Well, that's your riches. You got to see the magical coqui, the only magical coqui that exists, because no other coqui will have that happen. He goes, well, Tito's like not very happy about it. And he's like, well, that was my riches. I mean, I wanted riches. And Fernando's like, what are you going to do with a bunch of money on a tropical island? You already got everything you need. He's like, you know what? You're right. So he goes back home and the mailman had come by and he goes through his mail, and he sees this one envelope from a strange place. It looks like it has a bunch of names on it, and opens it up, and it's a check for $1 million. And not only for $1 million, but $1 million every year until he died. A relative of his had died in New York, and was a multi-billionaire, never even knew him, but it was the only family member left. And so that was his money that he got. And Tito said, "Oh, well, thank you, old cookie. It was a surprise, and I thank you for my gift." And Tito never used that money. He put it away and used it to help people on the island who needed help. And people celebrated him even after he died. The end.
So, Martin Garcia, are you ready for your solo story?
I am.
The word is football player.
Once upon a time, in a land called Dallas, Texas, there was a little girl named Mallory. Now, Mallory was a beautiful girl, a very smart girl. She was good at everything. People were just astonished at the things that she could do. Her parents, especially her father, thought that Mallory was probably going to be, first female president of the United States. But Mallory was different. Mallory wanted to go to the Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, being a girl, a lot of people had a lot of opinions about it. There were no girls on Little League football teams, and they wouldn't let Mallory play. So Mallory spent a lot of time trying to convince people to let her play football. Well, there was this one team that was the worst team, period. They never won any games. People actually liked playing them because they knew it was going to be easy game. So Mallory talked to the coach. Coach Peabody was his name, and said, "Hey, coach, I know I'm a girl, but I really want to play football." And he said, "Well, Mallory, here's the problem, is you're not big enough to play most of the positions. You might be able to, I don't know, kick." She goes, "Kick? That's what I want to do. Kick the football. I'm really good at kicking the football." So he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, Mallory, if you want, we'll put you on the team. You can kick the football. You can kick the field goals." And she's like, "Oh, thank you, Coach Peabody. Thank you so much. Thank you." So Mallory goes back, tells her father that she got on a football team. Well, her father, Mort, never thought anybody would let her on a football team, ever. And he told Mallory, "I'm sorry, but I can't let you be on a football team." And Mallory's like, "Well, why not? You said if I could get on a football team that you'd let me play." I said, "Well, it's because I didn't think you'd ever get on a football team." She's like, "Well, I did." And he's like, "Well, very good for being resourceful, but I can't let you be on the football team." She's like, "Well, that's not fair." And he said, "Well, this is something you need to learn. Sometimes life is not fair. Sometimes we want things that we can't have." She's like, "Well, how do you know you can't have something unless you tried to get it?" And he goes, I don't know what to say to that. You're just not going to be on the team." So Mallory was very upset. She didn't know exactly what to do. The first game was 2 days from now, and she wasn't sure how she was going to do it. So Mallory went to school, and she was very sad. And her teacher, Mrs. Brose, saw that she was sad. She said, "Mallory, why are you so sad?" And Mallory told her the story. She goes, Mrs. Brose says, "Well, he is your father, and, maybe you have to do what he tells you. But there is this. He said you couldn't be on a football team. What if you're not actually on the team, but you just go to the game? You could, go to the game and cheer, and then when they need to kick a field goal, and they don't have someone to kick the field goal, maybe they just go to the side and say, 'Hey, would you like to kick the field goal?'" And I said, "That is genius. I am going to do that. I'm going to go to the game. I'm going to cheer. And then I'll tell the coach to come get me when he wants me to kick football." So Mallory shows up at the game. Works perfectly. Her father didn't come. Nobody came that knew her. It was perfect. And actually, they won that game because Mallory kicked 5 field goals. 5 field goals. That's a lot of field goals. So Mallory kept quiet about it. So this was probably the 7th game of the season. And Mallory showed up. She was wearing a cheerleader outfit. She showed up to cheer. And lo and behold, who was there but her dad? And her dad came up to her and goes, "Oh my gosh, Mallory, I didn't know that you were a cheerleader. You never told me." "Oh, great. Well, I'm going to stay and watch the game." Mallory was terrified. Now she had to cheer, and her dad was going to find out that she was kicking field goals. Well, luckily, the team was playing the game, and they were not doing very well. They weren't getting close to the field goal, and they weren't scoring any touchdowns. But the other team was just as bad, and they didn't score anything either. So it was the end of the 4th quarter. Mallory was cheering. She didn't know any of the cheers. She was just making up cheers. Her dad was very happy, smiling down at her. And just about to end, there were like 5 seconds left in the game, and the team got close enough for a field goal. So Coach Peabody comes over to Mallory. Mallory looks up at the stands. She goes out on the field. Her father looks so upset. She goes out on the field, she kicks the field goal, and she makes it, and they win the game. They carry her off on their shoulders because this game was the game they needed to win in order to make the playoffs. Well, once Mallory got back to the sideline, her father came down. He's like, "Mallory, I thought I told you couldn't be on a football team." She said, "Well, I'm not on a football team. I'm a cheerleader for the football team. They just needed help, and so I helped them." And her father said, "Listen, young lady, that is brilliant. That is a brilliant way to get your way without letting me know." And that's the kind of gumption and the kind of tenacity and drive that I was hoping you would get from my telling you that you couldn't play football. Let that be a lesson to you. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something, even me. If you really want to do something, you go do it. I'm very proud of you, and I'll see you in the playoffs. Well, Mallory was so excited, so touched. She was crying, but she didn't want to let the team see that she was crying. And she kept kicking field goals for her team, and they made it deep into the playoffs. And as she got older, she got more and more opportunities. She got to play, she got to kick in college. And when the draft came along, the NFL draft, she didn't get drafted because she's a kicker, and kickers don't usually get drafted. But she got picked up as a free agent, undrafted free agent by the Dallas Cowboys, which is really weird because the Cowboys are a very conservative team. But Mallory kicked for them, and Mallory went to the Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys, and she kicked 10 field goals for 30 points. And with that 30 points and the additional points they scored with touchdowns, they won the Super Bowl by the largest margin ever in the history of Super Bowls. Mallory became a famous football player and was inducted into the Hall of Fame as the first female football player. The end.
Thank you, Martin Garcia, for being on the show tonight, and thank you to our listeners. Be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of One More Story.